Hey folks, my name is Aaron and welcome back to Major History. Today we're going to be talking about the New World, and this is part of my US history course, and I figured I'd get this one out of the way really quickly because I don't have much time today. So we're going to be starting off with the Native Americans, which were a group of nomadic hunter-gatherers that ended up on this continent through the Bering Strait Land Bridge. What is the Bering Strait Land Bridge? It is a land bridge that existed because of the Ice Age, froze over that little section of eastern Russia and um, western Alaska, and created a bridge for people to uh, go over and head south. Um, and why did they go this way? Well, they were following the food, which were woolly mammoths and stuff like that. So they would follow them, and that ended up in northern Canada and northern U.S., just Canada in general, and the northern U.S., what is today, I should say. And yeah, more and more people started to head south because it's warmer down south. They like the sun gives light. The sun is very important. Just keep that in mind. So the agricultural revolution for the Native Americans happened, and just like we talked about in world civilization, like in Mesopotamia, when people discovered how to engage with crops and animals in their region and to basically cultivate them in mass for themselves. And the same thing happened here in America with the Native Americans. And from this, certain complex societies would start to emerge, such as Chaco Canyon, which there's a picture down here in the bottom right. And we don't know why they stopped existing. And then Cahokia in the Mississippi Valley. We don't know why they stopped existing, but they had a population of about London's size at the time. Or I can't remember if it's at the time or by today's standards. I'm not too sure, but keep in mind that Cahokia was a large presence, and we don't know exactly why they stopped existing. Hard to say. Drought, famine, we don't know. And the same thing is for the Mayans in the Yucatan Peninsula. We don't know why they stopped existing, and but they were a very civilized people. But then there's the Aztecs, which we can say for a fact that it's the Europeans' fault that they collapsed. Although there is an argument to be made that Tenochtitlan would have collapsed anyway under the pressures of their people. The Aztec Empire is not so much an empire as like in Mesopotamia, where they were all a bunch of city-states, and they all interconnected in trade and warfare with each other. So the Aztecs fell because the hub where people went, Tenochtitlan, was starting to tax these people and started treating these people incredibly poorly. And so they when Hernan Cortez showed up and wanted to take over what the Aztecs had created, these people in the outer civilizations and cultures decided that we don't really have a choice here. It's either the Spanish kill us right now, or we side with the Spanish and start a bloody warfare, a bloodbath, really, in Tenochtitlan, which is now today Mexico City. So next, on a high note, we're going to start talking about the Silk Road, which was established sort of by Alexander the Great in 356 to 323 BCE, and this connected Europe to Asia through trade, and through this, a lot of things were passed along through trade, including the bubonic plague, and that spread all throughout Europe, and eventually the Ottomans, because the Romans used to control this entire area right here, once they fell and the Ottomans took over a lot of that area, they sort of ceased trade because they wanted more power. They taxed heavily, and as you can think, I mean, a lot of people didn't like that. This, along with Portugal being so far away, the furthest you can get in Europe from Asia, uh, they decided to find another way around. And Prince Henry the Navigator, who had already encouraged oceanic exploration at the time, uh, who had already created a school of navigation, uh, decided to create a plan for how they would get to Asia, and this involved sailing around Africa. And it was actually from this school that Christopher Columbus would initially, his idea would be rejected, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And in Africa, the trans-Saharan slave trade was already happening. People were being sold all throughout the Saharan Desert and all throughout Africa as a whole. And African kingdoms, uh, through sharing sugar and stuff, the Portuguese creating castles along the African coast and creating plantations there as well. They needed workers. And, well, I'm not going to pay for that, right? You don't want to pay for workers, so what do? You buy from the local slave trade. And this would eventually become the foundation for the transatlantic slave trade, as well as Columbus's adventures. So China, the reason I put China down here as benefiting a lot from trade is because if they were benefiting a lot from trade, they did not necessarily have the need to head east. So the reason I put that there is to explain why the Chinese didn't head east to the Americas first, because they are indeed a lot closer. And it's just because why? Why would they need to? They have Japan right there. They have Korea right there. They have India right there. And they have the Silk Road, which connects them to all of Europe. It would be a waste of their resources to head east and try to find something. Exploration was not something that they were interested in at the time, unlike the Europeans. And let's discuss the notion that Christopher Columbus, his whole goal was to show all of Europe and the whole world that the Earth was actually round and not flat, because everyone knew this already, man. In fact, the true debate was actually over Earth's size. And even then, not really a debate, because the people over at Henry the Navigator's school had already found this out. They already understood this. And even so, a 11th century mathematician, Arab mathematician called Abu Rayyan al-Biruni, I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong, actually calculated the size of the Earth already and published his works, and he was within 1% of the mean. And Christopher Columbus actually read this. The only problem with what Christopher Columbus thought was his interpretation of the word mile. So the Arab mile, which is what obviously Biruni was actually talking about, is around 2,000 meters in length. Whereas the Roman mile, which is what Christopher Columbus thought he was talking about, is actually around 1,500 meters. So that is quite a leap in length. And you can see down here, this is what Christopher Columbus thought would be the case. He thought he would sail, go past the Canary Islands, and through all the way to Chipango, or Japan, at the as it was known at the time. And they would eventually get to China, and he would find a much easier trade route that way. And he brought his idea to Portugal, and they were like, no, crazy Italian man. No, we don't, that you're ridiculous. That goes against everything we have ever known. So we're not going to sail all the way around. That would take more than 40 days. We're not doing that. And Christopher Columbus was like, you're wrong. And he went over to Spain. And Spain was like, I don't know. And they initially rejected him too. And, hold on, wait a second. Eventually, Spain would accept his offer. I don't know what offer. Oh, that's right. He promised gold and glory for Spain. And what did he do? Well, we'll see, because Spain gave him 3 ships to sail across the Atlantic, which is one of the only things that I will give him. This is my opinion, heavily. If I were a professor, I would not be... a professor would not tell you how to think. I am not a professor just yet, so I'm going to tell you how to think. Christopher Columbus, not the greatest guy, simply because, he landed in the Caribbean, and, gathering from himself, he was like, oh, these people are brown, and I know brown people in India, so these people must be Indian, and that's why, initially, even until the 1900s, Americans were calling Native Americans Indians, and you can thank Christopher Columbus for that stupidity. And when he got there, he met the Taino people, who were in the Caribbean. I don't remember I think it was on Hispaniola, and they were actually warring with the Carib people down south. And these people, they saw Christopher Columbus, and they started giving him what gold they had, all the gold they had. But even so, this was not that much. It's not what's depicted here. Like, they had some earrings and different little accessories, but it wasn't that much. And so from this, Christopher Columbus, having not found China, having thought he found some island off of India, was like, okay, I'm going to return to Spain, and I'm going to show them what I have. So he brought a couple of Tainos with him to show Spain. And Spain was like, I don't think that's what that is, because we have translators. You brought translators with you that spoke Malaysian and Chinese, and they don't speak that language, and they don't speak Indian either, apparently. So these people are not Indians. We're gonna send you back, just in case. And Christopher Columbus heads back on his second voyage. He sets up shop there. There are colonies now over on Hispaniola, the island that now houses Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And eventually, there's a faction. There are 2 factions that would eventually form. The people who were with Columbus and his brothers, because Columbus brought his Italian brothers there. These people, no matter what I'll say race they were called Italians, and there were people who were angry with the Columbus brothers, and these people were called Castilians because they mostly aligned with Spain, not necessarily Columbus, and they thought, we were promised gold and so many things, and our colonies are failing. And so they get really angry with Columbus and these factions, and there's a lot of garbage going on there. And eventually, a man named Bartolomé de las Casas, he was a Dominican friar, he wrote to Spain about the wrongdoings of Christopher Columbus and his slave trade that he developed with the Native American people. And eventually, Amerigo Vespucci is sent by Spain to see what was going on. He was another Italian explorer. So Amerigo Vespucci arrives, and he sees what's going on, and he is absolutely appalled. And he decides, okay, we need to get Christopher Columbus back. So but he needs evidence. So he writes a big-ass report about Columbus and everything, and when he brings him back, Columbus is in prison. And believe it or not, the Spanish have pity on him, and eventually let him go, and give him another voyage. And he sails, and he sails, and he sails, and eventually a hurricane comes. He is still convinced that he is in India, folks. Even during his third voyage, He is thinking that he is in India the entire time. But a hurricane comes and his ship is wrecked. There's a shipwreck, and his fleet and his people are deserted on an island and have to survive there. And eventually the people from his colony find him, and he's like, oh, please send help. Please bring us back. And, they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And they go back home, and they wait months to bring him back because a lot of people didn't like Columbus over there. So they wait a long time, and eventually they bring Columbus back. And I don't remember if this was his second or third voyage, I'm sorry. But just know that without the timeline, these things did happen. So yeah, that's Christopher Columbus's story. He eventually dies, and his son, Ferdinand Columbus, I think is his name, he writes a bunch of stories chronicling his adventures and how he discovered the Americas, and painted his father in a very nice picture for the Europeans, and eventually Americans would start to believe that he was a great man. But just remember that he and his brothers started the slave trade for Native Americans, and eventually there were no more Native Americans on Hispaniola or in the Caribbean at all. So just keep that in mind. The Taino and the Carib people, not necessarily extinct, but mostly gone at this point. Anyway, moving on. This is the last slide, I think. Yeah, so now we're going to be talking about some European powers in the Americas, especially Spain and Portugal. So Spain, was like, oh, we like this new world, because eventually, with Amerigo Vespucci, when he came back, he told Spain about the new world, and that gave them a leg up. And Portugal is like, what the heck, man? I want to go over there and find some stuff. And eventually, there's enough stuff going on to where they make a treaty, the Treaty of Tordesillas, and they divide the world. And just imagine that they didn't know that there was a lot of land over here, because Portugal would not have agreed to this. And that's why there's a lot of Portuguese people, and they speak Portuguese in Brazil. Yeah. Okay, so then there's God, Glory, and Gold, which is why people from Europe, and especially Portugal and Spain, wanted to go to the Americas. They wanted to spread the word of God. They wanted to bring glory back to their country. And most of all, they wanted gold. They wanted that money, that cash money. And eventually, Hernan Cortez, who is a conquistador, he sails for Spain, and he arrives and finds the Aztec people. And I've told you about these people already, I think, but he gets there and he turns a bunch of other Native American tribes around Tenochtitlan and storms the place in a bloodbath. Okay, we talked about this. Then there's Samuel de Champlain. He is a French explorer, and he founds Quebec in Canada through the Northwestern Passage, and he has a different relationship. The French have a very different relationship with the Native Americans, and they initiate trade for beaver skin and stuff like that, and they were heavily dependent on the trade. They didn't try to kill their people or anything like that, or, but then there's John Cabot, who creates the English claim to land in North America, and the Roanoke colony is formed, and the Roanoke colony eventually fails because they needed supplies from England, and they sent a ship out, and that ship may have been intercepted by the Spanish Armada, which was because Henry VIII, who was previously aligned with Spain through his marriage with Catherine of Aragon, he couldn't have any sons with Catherine. So he decided to divorce her. This is enough. We're done. And he annuls he goes in to the Pope and he's like, please, Catholic Pope, can I have an annulment? And the Pope is like, no. And so King Henry VIII is like, well, fuck Catholicism. We're gonna go Protestant now. And that creates the Protestant Reformation, folks. And some people say that people being Protestants brought about a Puritan ideology and created the Protestant or Puritan work ethic. The idea is that these people believe in predestination, and because of that, they decide, well, how can I guarantee that I am predestined to go to heaven? They decide to work their asses off, and which is why people think that's where people think the American dream came from. People work hard and want to be successful. Anyway, so Henry VIII, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, and eventually he dies. And his son, Edward I, has a short reign. He wants to keep Protestantism around. He wants to keep his sister, Mary, from going on, who is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. He wants to keep her off of the throne. But when Edward dies as a young man at like 17 or 16 years old, Lady Jane Grey becomes the queen for like a couple days, and Edward's sister Mary is like, no, I don't like that, and she has the Lady Jane Grey beheaded, and she becomes the queen, Queen Mary I, and she is married to a king of Spain, and that keeps the Spain and England aligned, at least for a little bit. And but no children came from that, and she really wanted to bring Catholicism back to England, and she did this in the worst possible way. She had mass fires, burn people at the stake, and she basically had Protestants killed and stuff like that. So we don't like Mary I all that much as English people, so we decide, I don't know why I'm inserting myself in here, so we decide, no. And Mary I is dead. I don't recall why, I'm sorry. And that brings Elizabeth I to the throne. And Elizabeth I is, she has the Elizabethan settlement, which says, hey, if you want to be, I'm gonna tell you all to go to Protestant church on Sunday, but if you want to be Catholic behind closed doors, I mean, you don't gotta tell me. So it's a don't ask, don't tell sort of situation with the Elizabethan settlement, and we're back to Protestantism at this point. And Spain doesn't like that. Spain doesn't like that at all. And, there's holy wars happening with the Spanish Armada. And, yeah, so, but eventually England will send supplies and people over to the Roanoke colony, and they'll come back, and no one is there. They've taken months to come back. They were already needing supplies, and we honestly don't know what happened to them. And as you can see here, they left behind a singular note, which was the word Croatan, or Croatoan, as that one says. And they wrote that somewhere. It's either on a tree, like in this, or as my professor says, on a trunk somewhere. And Croatan is the name of the group of people these Native American people that were nearby. So what does this mean? Does this mean that they assimilated with the Croatan, or did the Croatan kill them all? Or because these Native American people, the Croatan, they didn't have the Latin alphabet, so they wouldn't have been able to write that. So they left behind this note, and we still have no idea what this means. There were some accounts that some people saw Native Americans later with blue eyes, and that's, Native Americans didn't have blue eyes. So it's like, okay, interesting. Maybe they did assimilate with these people, but it's dubious at best. But yeah, okay, guys. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't have much else to say about it. That's just the introduction I have for you about the New World. I went through that very quickly and very nonchalantly and unprofessionally. So I'm sorry about that. I pretty much went off the cuff for that last part. Didn't make many slides for this one. I appreciate you guys enjoying this video and watching it until the very end. And I would consider subscribing if you did watch all the way until the end. And I would consider leaving a comment telling me how great this video was, and leaving a like because you loved it so much. And I think that, you should tell your friends about this channel and subscribe and hit the bell icon to hear more from me, because next time we're talking about Mesopotamia. And then after that, we're talking about Mesopotamia. And then after that, we're talking about ancient Egypt. Okay? And I might merge my world civilization video and my Western civilization video about the Mesopotamians together. I'm not too sure about that yet, but that's the idea, at least for right now. You'll see as the video comes out. So stay tuned for that. Put the notifications on to see videos from me. Okay. See you guys later. Bye-bye.